So let's look at some leaked rules for these possessed Cornate World Eaters. Just how much damage can these savage new 8-bound models be expected to do? Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking more World Eaters leaks, and this time we're going to be focusing on perhaps one of the most interesting new kits in the range, the 8-bound possessed World Eaters, the particularly angry guys who not only have their own butcher's nails to contend with, but also 8-bound bloodletters, whispering them to deeds of slaughter at all times. Games Workshop revealed their fun new 3-model kit not so long ago. It builds 3 models either out of the standard 8-bound or the Exalted 8-bound, the ones that have unlocked a higher level of demonic possession, so let's talk about some rules and melee attack profiles for both of those. As with previous leaks that we've talked about on the channel, this again is a text leak reportedly from playtesters, obviously not yet 100% verified. That won't happen until Games Workshop actually release the codex in full or preview it on Warhammer Community. But so far these text leaks coming from the World Eaters Discord server do seem to be fairly coherent with each other, not conflicting too much, and they have fit well with what little Games Workshop have shown us. I still treat these more as interesting teasers as opposed to stuff to be completely relied upon, but they should serve to give us a good taste of what sort of rules these models will get in-game. We have had a whole load of fun leaks for the upcoming World Eaters Codex so far. One big hole in them though was just what these 8-bound models would do in combat, so let's take a look at both units, starting out with the regular one and then onto the Exalted guys. So first up, the standard squad of 8-bound are supposedly an elite's choice for Codex World Eaters, 3 to 6 models at 40 points per model as per that points leak, and they've perhaps got a stat line that isn't too dissimilar to, say, the possessed Chaos Space Marines, albeit with an extra pip of strength. These guys get a 9-inch move, weapon skill 3+, and ballistic skill 3+, a strength of 6 and toughness of 5, 4 attacks, 3 wounds, leadership 8 and a 3+ save with a 5+ invul for being demons. Apparently they do get a sergeant who gets an extra attack over the rest of them, and overall it kind of feels a bit like Chaos Space Marine Possessed, but with a bit of a trade-off where you get a little bit less durability per point, as you're only getting the 3 wounds at toughness 5 the same as you would be otherwise, but they cost a lot more points than Possessed, but it does look like they are decently more threatening in melee, at least per model. Strength 6 is pretty nice, and it feels like they're getting the Mark of Khorne baked in there, and they should also get the World Eater's Legion trait as well, giving them an extra +1 attack and +1 strength in the first round of melee, so in theory they should be strength 7 on the charge. Weapons wise, the axes and chain blades that they're armed with are apparently called 8-bound eviscerators. These ones are strength user, AP -3 and damage 2, and each of them gives you +1 attack over your base amount, so when taking the World Eater's trait into consideration, that should mean that you'd get 7 attacks, all at strength 7, AP 3 and damage 2. The leaks didn't go into too much detail on this, but apparently there's a different Eviscerator variant with a double attack sweep profile at damage 1 that the sergeant can take. I have a feeling though that seeing as that would be free as per the points page, it probably would have some other trade-off, like maybe some AP. I guess it's not impossible that it could maybe refer to the big Eviscerator that this chap out of the Exalted unit gets. Maybe that would just be a sergeant option that either has a sweep or smash profile. Damage wise though, these guys really do look pretty brutal. Even for a small unit of 3 of them, which should be 120 points, that'd be 22 attacks at strength 7, AP 3 and damage 2, roughly equating to around about 12 dead guardsmen, 6 dead space marines, 2 or 3 dead enemy terminators, 12 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, or around about 3 wounds to a hard target with toughness 8, a 5+ invul and -1 damage. Broadly speaking, it seems that they're just very efficient against anything that's toughness 7 or less, but toughness 8 or -1 damage things will definitely give them a pause. Seems pretty brutal, and that sounds like some solid melee stats for 120 points. Otherwise, in terms of special rules, there are a couple of conflicting leaks here. Something scout style was rumoured, either a pre-game move which would be really nice, or being able to come out of strategic reserve on battle round 1, which I think would be kind of bad as it doesn't sound like they've got any innate way to make their charges a bit easier. I guess we'll have to wait and see on that one, but if they got a pre-game move then that could be really nice for them. You could have units of 3 of them zipping into scary positions, just hiding out of line of sight, and then daring your opponent to come anywhere within their charge threat range on that part of the table. Otherwise, there are a few stratagems from the rumours that look nice. Heroic Intervention would be pretty cool for them. A 2 CP for a +1 damage as well, getting all those attacks to damage 3, which would be brutal against heavy targets. Or a 1 CP 1 for 6s to hit, dealing 1 mortal wound as well, up to a maximum of 6. Both of those likely a bit more efficient on a big unit than a small one. Otherwise, I feel like the biggest question for these guys is maybe whether or not they're going to be core or not. Chaos Possessed kind of notably aren't. they're demonkin but not core, so they don't get character rerolls and things. But I feel like if the World Eaters Codex is going to have such a limited unit roster, I feel like giving them core wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, otherwise it'd just literally be Berserkers and Terminators. Overall certainly seem very threatening in melee, particularly so against anything that's either 2 wounds or toughness 7 or less, but maybe not the hardest to kill if they do get exposed for the points. Moving on, we've also got a few details for the Exalted Eightbound as well. They're an elite's choice with just 3 models per unit, so 135 points for the squad, no more no less. These guys seem to have a fairly similar stat line to the regular Eightbound. The only differences seem to be a 2+ weapon skill and a 4+ invul, so for the extra 5 points, a fair bit hittier and a little bit tougher, at least against things with OK AP. According to their leaked attacks profile though, apparently each one gets 1 8-bound Eviscerator and 1 8-bound Chain Fist per model. That does tally with the ones that Games Workshop previewed, I guess. The Sergeant had the great big 2-handed Eviscerator thing, but the other two did look like they were armed with a single mutated Chain Fist and a single Chain Axe of some sort. Apparently the 8-bound Eviscerator is again the same as the previous one. It sounds like that still gives you an extra attack, so I guess you make 1 attack with that, and make the rest of the attacks with the 8-bound Chain Fist, strength +3, so usually strength 10 with the World Eaters trait, AP -4, and damage 2, basically paying that small premium for extra AP, hitting a bit better, and higher strength so you can actually threaten big heavy targets like toughness 8 or 9. Apparently these things are a little bit different to standard Chain Fists. According to the leak, they don't get any standard -1 to hits like other Chain Fists do, but they also don't get any extra damage against vehicles like the standard ones on Terminators might. Still though, pretty threatening, and AP -4 can be pretty relevant with Armour of Contempt things. The Sergeant apparently has 2 different bits of gear, either can take double Chain Fists, which apparently upgrades his attacks from damage 3 to damage 2, probably worth it even if you're losing the single Eviscerator attack, and the Sergeant can also take that big Eviscerator, again I guess potentially the one that gets the smash or sweep profile. There's no points cost listed for that as well, so I guess the Sergeant gear will be included in the squad's price. If all that does turn out to be accurate though, then their damage output looks pretty immense. This is the rough estimate for a unit of 3 with a Sergeant with the double Chain Fists. Around about 13 dead guardsmen, so still better than the standard ones, even against light targets. I guess that's because of the hitting on 2+. 10 2-wound Space Marines killed in a single round of combat. Around 5 or 6 Terminators, the damage 3 Chain Fist coming in good there. A pretty crazy 20 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, or 7 or 8 wounds to a hard target with toughness 8, a 5+ invul, and -1 damage. According to previous leaks, they were also mentioned they might be able to deep strike, and they may have a prevent fallback sort of rule. Again though, with multiple conflicting leaks, maybe just sounds like a little bit unreliable. Still though, overall that's pretty brutal damage for an extra 15 points, significantly better than the standard squad, and I feel like with the 4+ invul included as well, I feel like I might be a bit more tempted to take these than the standard ones, though of course will depend a bit on which special rules they get, and whether or not there's any other positives or drawbacks. Plus, on top of that, I wouldn't forget that these guys would be able to access the blood tithe once you get it going. We don't know 100% exactly in what way you need to spill the blood to gain these benefits, but the last league had it destroyed units, friends, or enemies, and then you expend a certain number of points to get the army-wide buff of each of these. I feel like particularly standout ones might be the 6s to hit auto wounding, and the +1 to attacks bonus that they can get. Both of those will make them a lot more destructive, though the +1 to hit will be helpful for some things in your army, but less so for others. Overall, I feel like these two, based on these rules at least, will be adding up to a units that are very, very dangerous in melee, but maybe just not enormously tough for the cost, perhaps meaning that they will be in direct competition with things like Berserkers, which also feel like they're going to be fitting that profile, very destructive, but not enormously hard to kill compared with some things in 40k. Compared with, say, Possessed Chaos Space Marines, they definitely have a damage advantage with a huge 7 attacks at strength 7 and AP 3, but you're still getting a very similar defensive profile for 40 points rather than 28, at least on the standard 8-bound. I'd guess that if people do wind up using these in big numbers, you'd be likely wanting to take small squads of them and then move them up behind terrain. It is quite nice that you can just take 3 model squads, as it means that you can quite effectively just throw them into combat and not worry too much if they're killed in return, as opposed to having to play super careful with them. Let me know what you make of them though. Do you feel that these guys will be tempting to use in a World Eaters list? And out of the two, would you prefer the standard 8-bound or the exalted ones? I feel like for me the exalted ones probably have the nod over the other ones, unless the original ones do indeed get a pre-game move. I think that could make them a lot more interesting. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. We'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I'll be aiming to keep up with all the World Eaters previews, whether they come from leaked sources or Games Workshop themselves. Looking forward to reviewing the Codex in full once we get it. Otherwise, if you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an absolutely enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.